Hello, welcome to the Knynman YouTube channel. I'm Roger. I thought I'd take a minute and explain to you a little bit about this video you're about to watch. Now, this is the legend of Nick Black, and this is a story that I've told around the campfire for 25 years or so. I love telling the story, and it gets better every time. And my kids say they were traumatized by listening to the legend of Nick Black when they were little. So it makes me proud that I had at least some kind of impact on their lives. Hope you enjoyed the story. If you do, hit the like button down at the bottom of the page. Questions or comments, leave down below. If you're a new viewer to the Knynman YouTube channel, please subscribe. We have a lot to offer. Hope you enjoy this clip. It's great. Hello, I'm Roger, and welcome to the Knynman YouTube channel. I'm going to tell you a long-standing story that has a lot of history in this particular area. Now, you're going to hear some references about the Rio Cebolla Canyon, which is just to my left and across the river, just a little ways down this direction. And you'll also hear a little bit more about Navajo Peak, which is directly across the river and straight up behind me. So I'm going to tell you the legend of Nicholas Black. Hope you enjoy this. I love this, and there's a lot of parts of this story that are true. Okay. In her wheelchair, an elderly, frail woman gazes out the window and smiles. As she speaks, her words are strong, and her confidence, she tells her story. Nicholas Black walks out of the hacienda with Maria. Walking to his horse, he stops and turns to her. "I'll be back to get you." Nicholas puts his arms around Maria and gives her a long kiss. He climbs on his horse, and riding off, he turns and looks back. Low clouds and a cold fall rain cover the landscape. Nick Black was perched on his horse just inside the tree line. Staring ahead in deep thought with his future in mind, Johnny speaks out. "Stage must be running late today." The stage ran from Chama to Lindrith every Wednesday with a strong box full of mail and silver coin. The money was intended to be the payroll for the local lumber mills in the area. Jose climbed onto his horse, took a puff from his cigar, and he turned and looked with a smile. "What are you going to do with your share, Nick?" Nick paused, and before he could speak, Johnny turned and said, "I think I hear it coming." Johnny turned to Jose and Nick. "Okay, we all know what to do. No mistakes. Don't put up with any bullshit. Anyone gets in the way, kill them." With the Canyon Gang looking up the valley, the stagecoach comes into sight. As the stage approaches, it slowed down to cross a small ravine. The gang knew this was the chance they were waiting for. The gang came barreling out of the woods with scarves covering their faces and guns drawn. The gang stopped the stage. The guard who was riding shotgun raised his rifle. Nick shot that guard, who fell to the ground dead, and Johnny shot the driver, who also fell to the ground dead. Jose approached the stage and opened the door. He ordered 2 passengers out. 2 women climbed out quickly. Scared and crying, both were begging not to be hurt. Jose smiled and said, well, what do we have here?" And Johnny, being the leader, yelled at Jose. He says, "Leave them alone and get the box of silver. Nick, you unhook them horses and scatter them." Johnny looks at the 2 women and points south down the trail. "Start walking. Someone will find you." Nick disappears into the woods, and moments later he comes back into the view with the pack horse. He rides up to the stage, and Johnny looks at Jose. "Okay, get that box tied down. We've got to go. They're going to be looking for us." So the Canyon Gang gave a yell and rode off into the woods. As they got into the high country, the pace slowed. Nick was the first one to speak. "What are we going to do, Johnny? We just killed 2 men back there." And Johnny stopped and turned to the others. "The first thing we're going to do is get across the river. Then we're going to head into the Cebolla Canyon, and we're going to find a hiding spot for this box of silver." As the canyon gang finishes crossing the river, Johnny points towards a large canyon that opens up into the Chama Canyon. That's it. That's the Rio Cebolla. Johnny leads them into the mouth of the canyon, and Johnny speaks out. We're on the Jolly Ranch now. Let's find a place to bury the silver, and then we'll ride up and see Ben Jolly, see if we can hide out for a while. As they ride into the canyon, Nick is in deep thought. The girl he met in Santa Fe a few weeks earlier is going to be waiting for him. Johnny and Jose don't know about Nick's new romance. Nick recalls the last thing that he said to her. I'll be back and get you real soon, and we'll start our new life together. Nick remembers looking back as he rides away and sees her smile. Johnny stops and points to his left. Over there, between that big rock and that pine tree, that's where we're going to bury it. With the silver buried, the gang rides off and Johnny speaks out. Let's go up to Ben's and get something to eat, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do next. As the gang rides into the yard of the ranch house, the sun is sinking low. Ben has a wife, June, and 2 young daughters, Carla and Tina. As Ben walks out of the house, his family follows behind him. Ben and Johnny greet each other with a handshake and a hug, the way you would expect old friends to greet each other. Johnny asks Ben if the group could stay in the bunkhouse for a few days. Ben nods his head, says stay as long as you like. June speaks out and says, I'm making dinner, why don't you boys go wash up? June removes the last of the dishes from the table and disappears into the next room. Carla and Tina are playing near the fireplace. Carla, being the oldest, listens intently to the conversation at the table. Johnny explains to Ben what happened that day, and Ben asks Johnny where the strongbox was. And Johnny responds, well, we buried it down in the Rio Cebolla Canyon, not far from the river. Ben tells Johnny, well, you'll need to take me down there in the morning and show me where it's buried. I need to know in case something happens to you boys. And Johnny agrees. Ben and the gang get up from the table and walk outside. Ben tells the gang they can stay, but they need to stay out of sight. The next morning was beautiful, sun-filled, and little Carla and Tina were outside tossing seed to a group of chickens that were gathered in the yard. Across the yard, Ben and Johnny exited the bunkhouse. The two make their way over to the corral and mount their horses. As they ride through the yard, Ben looks back at the 2 girls. We're going to go for a short ride. We'll be back in a bit. Carla watches intently as they wind down the trail that leads to Cebolla Canyon. In the bunkhouse, Nicholas is sitting next to the window with his feet on the table. And Jose turns and looks at Nick and says, hey Nick, are you all right? You haven't been yourself lately. Nick looks with a big sigh and says, yeah, I'm fine. Jose gets up and walks over to the saddlebag hanging on his bunk, pulls out a bottle of whiskey and says, what you need is a drink. After several harsh drinks, Nick starts talking. I've met a woman I really like. I met her in Santa Fe and her name is Maria. I'm going to marry her someday. Jose speaks out with the nasty tone. You know Johnny's not going to like that, and I don't like it either. We're partners. You can't leave. During a long heated conversation, the sound of Ben and Johnny can be heard riding into the yard. After some conversation, Johnny walks into the bunkhouse. As he enters, Johnny has an angry look on his face. What's all the yelling about? Jose speaks out. Nick says he's got a girlfriend in Santa Fe. Johnny turns and looks at Nick, and Jose continues. He says he wants out. Johnny stares at Nick. Is this true, Nick? Nick nods his head, yeah. Johnny touches Nick on the shoulder. We already talked about this, Nick. No one is going anywhere. As Nick starts to speak, Jose interrupts with a harsh tone. You're into this to the end, Nick. And Nick looks at Johnny. You guys can have my share. Take it all. He looks at Jose. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of running. I'm done. I want out. Nick rises up out of his chair, and Johnny grabs Nick with both hands and shoves him back down. Jose grabs the whiskey bottle off the table and swings with all that he has. The bottle shatters as it hits Nick in the head. Nick slumps over and falls to the floor with a loud thud. Jose looks down at Nick. "I told you, Nick, you're not going anywhere." Johnny steps forward and puts his foot on Nick's chest and presses firmly, all while drawing his guns and putting it to Nick's head. Johnny turns to Jose. "Get a rope and gag him up." As Jose finishes, he looks up at Johnny. "What are we going to do with him?" Johnny pauses momentarily and looks at Jose. "We're going to get rid of him. Go saddle up the horses and grab some extra rope." And as Jose is walking out the door, Johnny speaks out. "Hurry up, it's going to get dark soon." Johnny looks down at Nick. "No one crosses me, Nick. The sooner I get rid of you, the better." As Nick is lying on the floor, he can hear Jose approach the bunkhouse with the horses. With tears in his eyes, he's thinking about Maria and the love for her that he will never see. The bunkhouse door opens and Jose walks in. "Okay, Johnny, the horses are ready." Johnny walks over to Nick. "Get over here and help me get him out of here." The two grab Nick by the arms and drag him out the door and to his horse. Drops him to the ground. Johnny looks down at Nick. "Ready to take your last ride, lover boy?" Johnny looks at Jose. "Help me get him on the horse." With all three mounted on their horses, Johnny reaches back and grabs the reins of Nick's horse as he looks back. After a short pause, he turns and looks at Jose. "Let's get this over with, Jose." Jose speaks out. "Where are we going, Johnny?" Johnny looks at Nick. "We're going to take a ride up to Navajo Peak. Just follow me." As the three follow a twisting and turning trail, the sun sinks. Did you hear that? Thought I heard something back there. Sorry. Got interrupted. I'll pick up where I left off here. That sounded creepy. Okay. As the three follow a twisting and turning trail, the sun sinks lower. They break out of the trees and approach the rim of Cebolla Canyon. Riding along the rim of the canyon, Nick looks down. In the far distance, he can see the two large trees where the money and the silver is buried. And he also stares down into the canyon. He stares down into the canyon as they pass. Johnny yells back to Jose, "Pick up the pace. We're losing daylight." Soon they reach the top of Navajo Peak. Johnny looks around. The terrain is rough. In a short distance is the rim rock with a straight drop off into the Chama Canyon. With Johnny still leading Nick's horse, Johnny leads them to the edge of the rim and looks down. "Take a good look, Nick. This is the last time you'll ever see the river." And Nick looks down. He's staring at the cold flowing waters of the Chama River. Johnny turns to Jose and points. "That tree right over there. Throw the rope over that long branch." Johnny turns and looks at Nick. Nick is shaking his head side by side, saying no. His black shirt is soaked with sweat dripping from his chin. His eyes open wide with fear. With a deep stare, Johnny speaks. "This is it, Nick." He turns and leads Nick's horse underneath the dangling rope. Johnny looks at Jose. "Get the rope around his neck and make sure it's good and tight." Jose rides over to Nick's horse and looks Nick straight in the eyes. And after a short stare, Jose grabs the rope and slides it over Nick's head. With a sharp jerk, he cinched the rope taut. Jose looks at Johnny and nods his head. Johnny looks at Nick, raises his Colt pistol. Nick's sweat, mixed with tears, runs down his cheeks. He stares Johnny straight in the eyes, and Johnny pulls the trigger. Nick's horse lunges forward, and with a loud crack, the rope snaps taut. In an instant, the rope ripped Nick's head off. Nick's body fell to the ground headless. At the same time, Nick's head hit the ground. For a short instant, Nick's eyes stared at Johnny. After a moment, Nick's head started slowly rolling down the slope towards the rim rock. Nick's head rolled down to the very edge of the cliff and stopped, and his eyes looked back up at Johnny, hauntingly, for one last moment. Then it fell off the edge of Navajo Peak and out of sight. Man, I keep hearing something back here. Okay, moving on. Jose looks at Johnny. What just happened, Johnny? Johnny yells out, "You cinched the rope around his neck wrong, you idiot." Johnny looks around and he points up the hill behind Jose. "Get the shovels. It looks like soft dirt over there." As the sun falls behind the mountains and to the west, the two start digging. After a few minutes of digging, Johnny turns to Jose. "Go get him." Jose drops his shovel and starts walking down the hill towards Nick. Jose stops and stares down the hill and turns to Johnny. And he yells, "Johnny, he's gone! Johnny, he's gone! He's gone!" Johnny yells, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I don't like this, Johnny. I don't like this at all. He's gone." Johnny walks down to Jose and looks around. "Where did he go?" Jose speaks out, "I don't know, but he's not here." "What are we going to do, Johnny?" Johnny looks at Jose. "Mount up and let's get back to the ranch. Let's get our gear and supplies." With a full moon as their light, the two ride into the ranch compound and to the bunkhouse. While Jose and Johnny are getting their gear together, Jose asks Johnny what the plans are. Johnny looks at Jose. "First thing we're going to do is we're going to go down and get the silver. And then we're going to head north where we know the law won't be looking for us. Now let's get the lanterns and let's go." Johnny and Jose rush and climb on their horses. The two ride off towards the trail, taking them into the Rio Cebolla Canyon. As they wind their way down the steep trail, Johnny stops. "We're real close, just around the corner." As they approach, they see a faint glow. They stop, and Johnny turns to Jose. "Turn that light off. We still have the full moon." Johnny slowly leads them to the turn. As they approach, the glow grows brighter. They make a turn in the bend. The spot where the silver buried comes into view, and a bright glow surrounds the treasure site. The two stop and stare at the glow. Johnny looks at Jose. "Let's get a closer look." As they move closer, Johnny stops. In the glow, he can see the outline of a headless man. He's sitting on a rock overlooking the treasure site. The glowing figure of a headless man stands up, facing Johnny and Jose. The ghostly image of a headless Nicholas Black steps forward. Both horses become distraught and restless. With fear in their faces, Johnny and Jose both pull their pistols and aim at the ghost of Nick Black. The ghost of Nick Black walks towards the two. Guns blazing, Johnny and Jose empty their pistols. With no reaction, the ghost just keeps on coming. Johnny turns to Jose with a shout. "Let's get out of here." They turn their horses around with a swift kick to their mounts. The two ride up the trail in the direction they came from. They disappeared in a cloud of dust visible through the full moonlight. When Johnny turns and looks back, the ghostly glow fades into black. The ghost of Nicholas Black stops and stands motionless. A ghostly shadow of a headless man turns and starts making its way, slowly winding its way down Rio Cebolla Canyon. The ghost of Nicholas Black slowly approaches the Chama River. At the river's edge, there's a short pause. Then the ghost starts moving up the river, passing the spot where his head actually rolled into the river. Once the ghost passes Navajo Peak, he crosses the river and then makes its way slowly back down the other side, with a deep tone echoing off the canyon walls. The words, "Where's my head? No one will rest. Where's my head? No one will rest," could be heard. The ghost in its faint glow slowly drifted in and out of the trees all the way down to Cebolla Canyon. Then the ghost of Nicholas Black then turns around, crosses the river, and starts back up again, searching the river for his lost head. Goes on all night long. At the sign of first light, the faint glow of Nick Black's ghost makes its way back up to the Rio Cebolla Canyon. The ghost approaches the spot where the silver is buried, then sets on a large rock overlooking the burial site. And that's what he does. He guards the silver during the day, and when the sun goes down, he walks up and down the Chama River looking for his head. Oh, and as for Johnny and Jose, hell, they came riding through the ranch house compound that night looking like they had just seen a ghost. And staring out the window, she finishes her story. Carla turns with a smile and speaks out. And that box of silver is still buried somewhere in the Rio Cebolla Canyon. Thank you for listening to the legend of Nick Black. I'm Canyon Man Raj. Have a good night.